100 million. That's not a typo. One single vehicle has sold over 100 million units. More than the Model T, more than the VW Beetle, more than the Toyota Corolla. More than every Ferrari, Lamborghini, and Porsche ever made combined. Times 1,000. Not a car, not a truck. A 50cc motorcycle that weighs less than your girlfriend and has an engine smaller than your lawnmower. And here's the kicker. If you're watching this from America, this machine has completely vanished from your roads. While it conquered half the planet, it became invisible in the land that invented the assembly line. This is the story of how a bankrupt Japanese company studied American washing machines, copied their simplicity, and accidentally changed more lives than any vehicle in human history. This is the Honda Super Cub. And this is why 100 million people trusted it with their dreams. Act 1. The impossible world. Picture this. It's 1958 in post-war Japan, 13 years since the bombs fell, and the country is still broken. The average Japanese worker makes 15,000 yen per month. That's $42. A small car costs 400,000 yen. Do the math. That's over 2 years of salary. For millions of Japanese families, personal transportation wasn't just expensive. It was impossible. The streets were chaos, bicycles everywhere, overcrowded buses, a few crude motorized bicycles, war surplus engines clipped onto bicycle frames, leaking oil, breaking down constantly. While America was building interstate highways and buying tail-finned Cadillacs, Japan was trying to figure out how to get to work without walking 2 hours each way. And into this broken world, a man named Soichiro Honda had a vision that everyone said was insane. What if we gave everyone wings? Not everyone who could afford them. Everyone. Period. While Harley-Davidson was building chrome-laden machines for American rebels and Triumph was crafting cafe racers for British speed demons, Honda asked a different question entirely. What if we built something for everyone else? But here was the problem. Building a motorcycle for everyone meant solving impossible challenges. Make it cheaper than a bicycle to operate. Make it more reliable than anything on the market. Make it so simple that someone who'd never touched a motorcycle could ride it immediately. And here's the kicker that made everyone laugh at Honda. It had to look respectable, not like a motorcycle at all. The challenge was impossible. The investment required would bankrupt them. Soichiro Honda didn't care. Act 2. The washing machine genius. Enter Soichiro Honda and his business partner Takeo Fujisawa. Honda's team didn't start by looking at motorcycles. They started by looking at washing machines. Think about that. While every other motorcycle company was studying racing bikes, Honda's engineers were watching Maytag and Whirlpool demonstrations. Why? Because American washing machine companies had solved the exact problem Honda faced. They'd taken complex machinery and made it so simple that anyone could use them. A housewife who'd never touched a wrench could operate a washing machine. Honda wanted a motorcycle that just worked. The development took 3 years and nearly destroyed the company. Honda invested their entire capital into this single model. Engineers worked 18-hour days. Some slept in the factory. The breakthrough came from obsessive precision. First, the engine. 49 cubic centimeters overhead valve, 4-stroke single cylinder. Tiny. Your lawnmower probably has a bigger engine. But through precision engineering, Honda extracted 4.5 horsepower at 9,500 RPM. Let me put that in perspective. Contemporary mopeds were making 2 to 3 horsepower at best. The Super Cub's engine was spinning at nearly 10,000 RPM, race bike territory, but doing it reliably for years. But here's where the washing machine lesson paid off. The transmission. Honda created the world's first mass-produced semi-automatic clutch for a motorcycle. Think about what this meant. On a normal motorcycle, you need 3 things happening simultaneously. Clutch lever with your left hand, throttle with your right hand, gear shifter with your left foot. The Super Cub eliminated the hand clutch entirely. A centrifugal clutch engaged automatically when you twisted the throttle. You still shifted gears with your foot, but the clutch handled itself. Anyone who could ride a bicycle could master the Super Cub in 5 minutes. Delivery drivers could carry packages with one hand. Housewives could ride without wrestling with controls. Farmers with injured hands could still work. Honda had studied washing machines and learned the ultimate lesson. Complexity is the enemy of accessibility. The frame was equally brilliant. The step-through design meant you stepped through the middle like mounting a scooter, but with 17-inch wheels for stability. The bodywork protected riders from rain and engine heat. The chain ran in an oil bath, sealed from the elements. It could go 6,000 miles between adjustments. Now, the performance numbers don't sound impressive. Top speed, 43 miles per hour. 0 to 30, about 5 seconds. But here's what those numbers don't tell you. Fuel economy, 150 miles per gallon. At 1958 fuel prices in Japan, you could ride for an entire week on the cost of a single bowl of ramen. British bikes needed valve adjustments every 500 miles. Harleys required constant tinkering. The Super Cub could run 3,000 miles between tune-ups. Some owners reported running Super Cubs for 20,000 miles with nothing but oil changes. Honda didn't just build a motorcycle, they built a promise. Your life will be easier, not harder. Act 3. The Revolution. The Suzuka factory, built in 1960 for Super Cub production, was the most advanced motorcycle plant in the world. Every part was measured, every process was documented. By 1959, 1 year after launch, Honda was building 5,000 Super Cubs per month. By 1960, that number hit 16,000. The plant was running 24 hours a day. But Japan alone couldn't absorb this production. Honda needed to go global. The American invasion began in 1959. While Harley-Davidson was marketing to rebels and outlaws, Honda did something completely insane. They spent $5 million on a campaign that changed advertising history. You meet the nicest people on a Honda. The ads showed college students riding to class, housewives going shopping, businessmen commuting to work, all clean-cut, respectable, smiling. Harley dealers laughed. Who would buy a 50cc motorcycle in the land of V8 engines? Everyone, as it turned out. By 1963, Honda was selling 7,000 units per month in America alone. College campuses were overrun with Super Cubs. Pizza delivery guys adopted them. Cheap to run, easy to park, never broke down. Even police departments bought them for parking enforcement. But as America got wealthier and bigger bikes became status symbols, we moved on. The Super Cub faded from American culture in the 80s and 90s. The rest of the world, they were just getting started. The real explosion happened in Asia. In Thailand, in Vietnam, in Indonesia, the Super Cub became so ubiquitous that in many places, Honda became the word for any motorcycle. The numbers became staggering. By 1968, 10 years after introduction, 5 million sold. By 1974, 10 million. By 2005, 50 million. By 2008, 60 million. Production expanded to 15 countries. Each market got slightly different versions. The engineering evolved constantly, but carefully. But Honda never changed the fundamental design. And the reliability stories became legendary. A Thai farmer reported 180,000 kilometers on his 1961 Super Cub with only routine maintenance. A Japanese postal worker logged 300,000 kilometers delivering mail. In Vietnam, mechanics specialized in rebuilding Super Cubs with over 500,000 kilometers. The engines just wouldn't die. Act 4. The cultural earthquake. But here's what the sales numbers don't tell you. Here's what really matters. The Honda Super Cub didn't just change transportation, it changed society itself. In 1950s, America motorcycles meant rebellion. Marlon Brando in The Wild One, Hell's Angels. If you rode a motorcycle, you were making a statement. I'm not like you. Honda looked at this and said, what if motorcycles meant freedom instead of rebellion? The "You Meet the Nicest People on a Honda" campaign wasn't just advertising, it was cultural warfare. Honda was saying, motorcycles aren't for outlaws, they're for everyone. Harley-Davidson was selling the American dream of rebellion. Honda was selling something bigger, accessible freedom. And in developing countries, that dream meant everything. Let me tell you about Vietnam. After the war ended in 1975, Vietnam was devastated. Infrastructure destroyed, economy in ruins, millions of people needing to rebuild their lives. And what did they rebuild with? Honda Super Cubs. The Super Cub became the backbone of the economy. Small business owners used them to transport goods. Families used them to travel between villages. Street vendors used them as mobile shops. You'd see a single Super Cub carrying a family of 4, or 400 pounds of cargo, or live chickens, or a wedding dress. The Super Cub wasn't just transportation in Vietnam. It was hope. It was survival. It was the vehicle that helped an entire nation get back on its feet. Same story in Thailand, Indonesia, Peru, where they climbed mountain roads that would destroy other vehicles. Honda had accidentally created something bigger than a motorcycle. They'd created economic mobility for half the planet. The Super Cub democratized something that had always been exclusive, the feeling of freedom. Before the Super Cub, motorcycles were for people who could afford them and handle their complexity. They were for enthusiasts, for rebels. The Super Cub said, freedom isn't just for them, it's for everyone. The 18-year-old girl in Tokyo riding to her first job. The farmer in Thailand expanding his business. The Vietnamese family rebuilding their life after war. Every one of them experienced the same thing: the wind in their face, the ability to go anywhere, the feeling that the world was bigger than they thought. That's not just good engineering. That's changing what it means to be human. Act 5. The Legacy. October 2017. The 100 millionth Honda Super Cub rolls off the production line at the Kumamoto factory in Japan. No other vehicle, not the VW Beetle at 23 million, not the Model T at 15 million, not even the Toyota Corolla at 50 million, had ever reached this number. The Super Cub stands alone, double the Corolla's sales, 5 times the Beetle, nearly 7 times the Model T. Think about the engineering achievement here. Honda created a machine so well designed that it remained fundamentally unchanged for 60 years. So reliable that many of those 100 million are still running today. So efficient that it uses less fuel than most people drink coffee. So simple that it can be fixed with basic tools anywhere on Earth. The Super Cub wasn't just successful because it was cheap. The communist bloc built cheap motorcycles that all died within years. It wasn't just reliable. BMW built reliable motorcycles that cost 10 times as much. The Super Cub hit the perfect intersection of price, performance, reliability, and usability. Today, you can buy a brand new Super Cub for about $3,900. Adjusted for inflation, that's actually cheaper than the 1958 model. It'll still get 150 plus miles per gallon. It'll still run for decades with basic maintenance. In a world obsessed with horsepower wars and technological complexity, the Super Cub remains defiantly, brilliantly simple. The modern motorcycle industry exists because of the Super Cub. It proved motorcycles weren't just for rebels and racers. It funded Honda's racing programs that dominated MotoGP. It generated the profits that let Honda develop the CBR, the Goldwing, the Africa Twin. Every Honda motorcycle owes its existence to a humble 50cc commuter bike. But the real legacy goes deeper. The Super Cub democratized freedom for half the planet. It enabled small businesses from Bangkok to Lima. It connected rural villages to urban markets. It gave mobility to people who could never have afforded cars. In developing nations, the Super Cub wasn't just transportation. It was economic opportunity. It was social mobility. It was freedom itself. As we chase electric vehicles and autonomous cars and hyperloops, there's something we forget. The best engineering isn't always the most complex. Sometimes it's about solving real problems for real people with elegant simplicity. 100 million Super Cubs, each one representing someone's first job, first date, first taste of freedom, first step toward a better life. Each one engineered to the same exacting standards that Soichiro Honda demanded in 1958. Each one a testament to the radical idea that everyone deserves reliable, affordable transportation. That's not just manufacturing success, that's engineering democracy. That's changing the world, one small, simple, perfect motorcycle at a time. What's your Super Cub story? Share it in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the most successful vehicle ever created, hit subscribe, because the stories of engineering genius hiding in plain sight. They're just getting started.